Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the importance of understanding and controlling parasites in sheep, and the emphasis there on in sheep as well, because tonight is about internal parasites, and there is a really good one out there on the NSA website with regard to scab and other external parasites. So go and have a look at those after this one if you're looking into that sort of stuff. This is a joint presentation as well between NSA and Moredun. If you are a member of NSA, you do get associate membership of Moredun, and if you run across to their website, you can sign up to their membership there. So that's another reason why NSA membership is great value. I'm Kevin Harrison. I'm chairing tonight. I'm a sheep farmer. I'm a farm manager down near Bath. I'm chair of the NSA Policy and Technical Committee, and I am also chair of SCOPS. Before I introduce our formidable speakers tonight, we're going to do a little word cloud, and at some stage there'll be a link appear in the chat. And the question would be, what major parasite concern have you had this year? And it might not necessarily be something that's affecting your sheep. It might be something that you're concerned about, or something that you've worried you might be doing wrong, or you want to do and you haven't quite got enough information. So if you just click on the link, I believe, in the chat, and then you can go in and put a word in. If you got any questions and answers, pop them in the Q&A box down there. We are going to try and keep it quite fluid tonight, so if there's a question that comes up within the discussion, we'll try and deal with it as we go along. If not, we'll approach it at the end. Interesting that we all farm sheep, but what we really are doing as well is farming parasites, and we've got like our sheep, we want to keep the good ones. We don't want to let any bad ones in, and we want to look after what we got and within reason, and then and control any damage or harm they might do to our animals. So three great speakers tonight. I'm very lucky to work with all of them within SCOPS and the NSA. So we've got Dave Bartley, who is a very veterinary parasitologist with nearly 30 years of experience and research in roundworms in livestock. He's an interest in all aspects of sustainable parasite control, from anthelmintic resistance and parasite epidemiology to knowledge exchange. He sits on both the SCOPS and the COWS committees. There's a lot I could say about all three of these people, but I'm going to stick to the script and just read the good bits and not embarrass them. And then we have Leslie Stubbins. For approaching 40 years now, Leslie's been a leading figure in the UK sheep sector, and played a big part in my career. A huge help to me in my career as I've gone through it over the last 35 years. So that's not far off those 40 years, and I'm sure she's been a huge help to many of you out there tuning in. She's gained a UK-wide reputation for her outstanding knowledge and expertise in all aspects of the industry, and particularly sheep nutrition and parasite control. She's an independent sheep consultant working with sheep farmers and the wider industry. Leslie also sits on SCOPS committee and is the driving force behind many of the achievements. For example, her work on the code of practice for contract mobile dippers and use of organophosphates for sheep dipping, and it's been highly influential. She was also the winner of the NSA George Headley Memorial Award for outstanding contribution to the industry back in 2019. Time flies. And then we have Philip the Fluke Scoose. Philip is a principal scientist at Moredun Research Institute, having worked there for nearly 30 years on various aspects of sustainable controls of worms and fluke in livestock. His research interests are in parasite diagnostics, detection in the environment, vaccination and anthelmintic resistance. He also has interests in the effect of climate change on parasite epidemiology and the impact of endemic disease on the carbon footprint of livestock production. He's also the Scottish Environment, Food and Agricultural Research Institute, otherwise known as SAFARI, Gateway Knowledge broker for livestock. Now, my maths tells me that there is 100 years worth of knowledge and expertise within the sheep industry, and then a few years of mine struggling along. So we should be in for a good one tonight. And if I come back, Leslie, to sort of that thing I said there about, farming parasites, and we've had a really strange year this year, haven't we? And the atypical weather, really, and it's continuing to be weird, hasn't it? But sometimes wonder how we're going to cope, and it throws up different scenarios. It's just a hard one. What are your thoughts this year?
Yeah, well, it certainly is. I think the farm to farm variation as well. Some people have had virtually no sign of any parasites. Others have already had quite a high challenge. So I think that's kind of what Phil and Dave and I, that's a bit of our theme tonight, really, is to try and talk people through, try and answer your questions, try and get you thinking about what maybe you can do to not let them catch you out, because the weather's going to change probably in the next 10 days and the parasite challenge will change with it. So, Kevin, I think that's really a bit our theme, isn't it, tonight? We want to try and put some things out there, answer some questions, help you do some things which will stop the parasites getting the upper hand in a year like this.
You want to take us through some
Yeah, okay.
presentations?
Well, I've just got I've got 4 slides really, just as an introduction, and say good evening, everybody. And I'm always, when people do introductions like that, you can see us all sitting there thinking, "Ooh, what's he going to say next?" But thanks for that, Kevin. That was great. I'm just going to set the scene really, from a SCOPS point of view. And my first question is, what is it we are actually trying to achieve in terms of sustainable worm control?
You're muted, Leslie.
Yeah, it's not working, Katie, in terms of taking these slides on. I can't. Where's Katie there?
I am, yeah. Leslie, if you can hand back over to the host, then I can perhaps add the other version up, which might
Yep.
be easier. Just bear with me just a second, sorry. Open that one up. Just loading now, won't be a moment.
Okay, that's all right. Well, I'll keep talking while you're doing that. But really, just setting the scene, and really, what it is we're trying to do is we're trying to use as little anthelmintic, as little wormer as possible, but as much as is necessary, as Kevin was saying, to safeguard the health and welfare and the performance of the animals. Because nowhere does anyone want any of these recommendations to impinge on the performance of the animals. That's not the name of the game. And so, really, what we want to talk about tonight are some of the tools that we've got to be able to allow us to do that. So if I was looking at my second slide now, I'd be looking at the SCOPS principles, okay? And really we can boil those down to 4. So the first principle is, when we dose, we always want to make that effective. And we're not going to dwell on that tonight, but obviously if people want to talk about it, getting the dose rate right, administering it right, really important. The second one is don't import things that you haven't already got. So the quarantine routines and not bringing in resistant worms, or Haemonchus contortus is a worm species that, again, is something you can, if you've not got it, you can help to reduce the risk that you'll get it through that. The third one is that, we only want to actually treat animals and reduce the amount of pressure that we've got on the worm population in that animal for selection for resistance. So again, there are things that we can do to reduce that. But the fourth one is the one I think we really want to concentrate on tonight, Dave and Phil, and that was, to reduce our reliance on these products, particularly in a year like this, where we're really not sure where it's all going unless we're doing some monitoring. And the temptation might be, oh, well, I better just go in and treat anyway because I'm not sure what's going on. And that really isn't doing anything to help us to reduce our reliance on these products as we go through the season. So that's where we want to concentrate. Now, oh, we've got something coming back. Okay, so you can go to my second slide, please. Katie, that'd be great. So, yeah, okay. So what that means is, in practice, only treating animals when it's necessary. So when we think we need to, and nowadays what we're increasingly doing is only treating those animals which require a treatment. So if you like, what we're calling this targeted treatment, targeted selective treatment, which I know Dave will talk a bit more about. Okay, go on. I'm not sure I can do it. Nope. Okay,
Trying to get it to go. Yeah, I am trying.
Okay. Oh, no, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Struggling.
Don't worry about it. So,
It's a good job you'd memorized the SCOPS principles, Leslie.
so, so we've got four things. I've got several things on here. So the sort of tools that we've got are fecal egg counting, which again I know Dave's going to talk about. We've got animal factors as well. So we've got things like ewe body condition scoring when we're talking about ewes, and we've got lamb performance when we're talking about lambs, which again we'll come to. And then, of course, we've got other things which Philip's going to talk about a bit more in terms of blood tests. We're increasingly getting blood tests that we can use to be able to monitor what's happening with these parasites and when we might need to treat, and also which animals we might need to treat. Okay, so if I could just swap out to my last slide now, please, Katie. And my final slide is to say, when we're starting to talk about targeting treatments for lambs, you saw that very briefly and it's gone again. When we're talking about targeting treatment for lambs, we need to be, or you need to be as an individual, aware of what your actual targets are. You know, how much do you know about the targets? And, you know, looking at the quality of the grazing. So there's no point in expecting, as you can see on the screen there, 300 grams a day growth rate from lambs if they're on poor quality pasture that's really only capable of 100 grams a day if you're lucky. So understanding those targets is really important, and having that background information when you start to use these tools and you start to interpret the information that you've got is really important. So, you know, looking at that graph on the right hand side, if your target is 250 grams a day, which is roughly, you know, where we would really hope to be, the animals that you might be looking for to treat are the ones inside the red circle that are falling below that green line that's sloping up there. They're the ones that we want to identify, and they're the ones that, but you need to know what your target is. So those are the sorts of things we're looking at. I'm going to hand over to, I think it's Dave next. Oh, and there was just that one final one there, just to say to you, you know, your creep feeders, your targets are going to be even higher. So, you know, are you doing any weighing? Do you know what your targets are? Do you know what the expectations are? And that will be a real help to underpin the sort of thing that Dave's going to talk about in terms of the tools. Thank you. And sorry, that was a bit pizzicato, but
I frightened myself this year by doing some fecal egg counts on some of my ewes. Well, all of my ewes actually, pooled samples, and it's surprising where they were. And you've got to farm the sheep in front of you, and the ewes and that look great, and the lambs were fecal egg count was low too. So, you know, I just thought I'd sit and just monitor it and see what's going on. And you know, 10 days later they come down later massively. You know, whether I just picked up a really bad one of the samples, which really kicked it sky high. But it's just sort of just emphasised for me that importance of not doing a knee-jerk reaction of one fecal egg count, and just getting your eye on what's actually happening within your flock.
Right, the next slides are just on their way. Apologies, my internet is really struggling. I don't know why. There's normally no issues at all, but I'll just get your slides ready for you, Dave.
Excellent, thank you.
Should be okay, I hope.
That'll be.
Can you see that?
No, not a second, but I can.
Okay.
That's
Right, we are almost there.
excellent. And
There we go.
excellent. Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, thank you for that. And Yeah, I mean, going on from what Leslie and Kevin have said, part of what I wanted to talk about was sort of monitoring and testing. Why should we bother about it? And Leslie's very eloquently, as Kevin has as well, talked about the productivity and efficiency and good animal health and welfare. And these things are really, really important. But there are other benefits that can be had from that sort of monitoring and testing. You can identify issues early, and Kevin sort of mentioned that, is having an idea of what was going on in his ewes allowed him to make decisions on what might happen, and by looking at or using the tests that Leslie spoke about, that gives you an idea really early on, particularly things like fecal egg counts, and that allows you to sort of reduce that wastage, of animals that you might cull out or not. I think the other thing that's really important is that by understanding what is going on, and again, these are discussions we have on quite often, it helps to identify where risks might occur on your farm, where your animals are. If there's animals, particularly with things like nematovirus, and this can happen early in the spring, summer, but it also can happen later into the season in the autumn too. Particularly with these sort of things, you can identify where there might be risks, and this can happen with other parasites too. So you can say, well, okay, I know that there's parasites there, and what do I want to do? Do I want to put sort of use to clear it up? Do I use cattle? Do I want to do something else that will allow that to clear up? Or do I accept that it's got a parasite risk and I just need to keep on monitoring it? A lot of conversation goes on about reducing sort of carbon footprints. And of course, animals that are not efficient stay on your ground for longer. They put more of have more of an impact on that carbon footprint compared to those that are way to market sooner. And also, that sort of maintaining effectiveness of treatments and making sure that they work. Can I have the next slide, please? And one of the major tools, and Leslie mentioned it, are the fecal egg counts. So when we're thinking about egg counts, we think about, they're there for roundworms, and often we think about what they can and can't do. And they very much are there to help you identify, are roundworms a problem? And that's very much a thing early on in the season, where there might be scour in animals. That could be nutritional, it could be down to coccidia, but it also could be down to worms. And egg counts very much are, in that early stage, able to identify that, as well as they are for later in the season. They can be used to decide when to treat. And again, Leslie was talking about how to target treatments. Egg counts can be used as one of those ways of doing it. It can be also used to help identify which groups of animals to treat. And very much, and one that I'm a great believer in, is that thing of, actually did a treatment work, and things like the pathway and the preparing for sustainable farming initiatives actually allow us to do that, where we can have a look at it. And I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. They do have limitations, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. So if I can have the next column on that slide, there are limitations. Things like nematovirus, they may have disease occurring in your animals before an egg count is there, but that is an exception more than the rule. An egg count is a snapshot. It's what was in those animals at any given time. So for the benefit of it to really, for you to identify risk and identify what's going on, the more you do, the more you get out of it. There are other tools, and again, I'll talk about that in a second, things looking at weight gain, which might help make work on certain systems better than egg counts. But again, egg counts are there as part of it all. I
do find as well, Dave, the more you do, the more questions come up. and the more you find yourself looking at, it's on the Scots technical manual to see what you should be doing. But,
they do, and that is the thing, is I think if they were nice and easy to control, we'd have had it done and dusted. But it is. But I mean, Kevin, do you do lots of these things? Do I mean, where do you find the most use out of these? You know, if you don't mind me asking, where would you see the most use for it?
From the testing.
Sorry, yeah.
Really, just like early on to get that base rate, and then just to keep monitoring through the summer, and I have found it, because I'm changing breeds from a more intensive creek-fed indoor system to now outdoor lambing and grazing the same pastures, and it has changed the whole parasite game for me completely. Really, it's it makes you realise how well, I wouldn't say easy, because I might offend someone who's struggling, but how more regimental the intensive system was. You're almost lambing, and the lambs are almost growing at the right time for the nematodirus hatch and things like that. Whereas when you're lambing in April and you're grazing old ground, and the ewes have been out all winter, and it's a completely different. So I'm really still getting my head around it, but it's great to sort of get just to see the difference, and see where the egg counts really go. But also bearing in mind it's the lamb we're protecting as well at the same time, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and I agree. I think quite often the more you know, the less you realise you know, and and the fact it does bring you up more questions. And please don't take from that just because you have the information in front of you that it makes the whole things easier, because it doesn't. It's part and parcel of the sort of package of things that we need to use to make decisions.
We were meant to have a poll. I don't know if Katie's computer system's up to it, if she's struggling. I wouldn't want to crash everything.
No.
If you are up to it, well, if you've got to challenge things, then don't worry. I think
we will.
Bear with me. I think I can. Oh. Not giving me the option yet. It should be set up with it. Leslie, are you still host? If you could make me host again, I think I can probably share.
if it's going to stop the flow, then don't worry. We'll keep moving.
Yeah, I don't believe I'm host at the moment. So yeah, if I can be again, then as soon as it comes up, I'll pop it up. Okay.
Carry on, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and one of the things, where we, within the sort of pathway and the Preparing for Sustainable Farming initiative is, this looking at treatments and whether or not we can identify if they're working. The most expensive treatment you're going to give is one that doesn't work. And there are lots of different ways of doing this, and there's lots of different terms for it. But there's two major ways. You can look at an egg count post-treatment. Can I have the next little section up of this as well? Cheers, thank you. So you can look at defined times. So the yellow drench, 7 days after treatment, and the rest of them at sort of 14 days. And you can look at that post-treatment. If you see eggs, then that might indicate there's a problem. The problem with looking post-treatment is that actually, if there aren't any eggs, that may mean brilliant. There's nothing to worry about. But it also may mean that there was nothing there to begin with, and that treatment may not have been required. So, yep, the post-drench efficacy check, the post-drench check is really useful. But again, it is limited by what it can do. Hopefully, a lot of you will have done the sort of wormer treatment check over the last last 12 months. And, for those of you who haven't, basically it is looking at 15 samples collected off your farm. Hopefully they get pooled to make a single count. We do that before treatment and post-treatment. And basically what you're looking for is for that count to go down by a significant amount. The actual figure is 90%, but that doesn't really matter. What you want is it to go as far down as possible. And as I say, there's money there to be able to do these things within the pathway and the PSF systems in Scotland. But of course, the egg counts aren't the only way that we can look at it. There are, as Leslie said, looking at targeted treatments. And if I can have the next slide, please, that would be fab. Oh, I definitely don't want to be talking about liver fluke. That is definitely out of my pay scale. Could we go back one, please? Because I could talk about that, but Phil's going to get really umpy if I do his talk for him. There are ways of doing this. There's targeted treatments and there's targeted selected treatments, and these are terms that you may have heard in the press and stuff. And basically, the difference is with a targeted treatment, you treat the whole group as a whole, and the decision to make that is based on a whole different ways. And targeted selected treatments is basically treating individuals. Again, the difference between this is deciding how you might do it, and those decisions could be based on egg counts or body weight, as was mentioned. They could be on body condition, diarrhea. So again, it's identifying what you expect from your animals and then deciding what it is that's what it is that you're going to do. And then you can make decisions as to whether you're going to leave some of them untreated, there's no golden rule to this. It's basically what you're comfortable with, what your system is comfortable with. So leaving some untreated is good because it means that you basically have worms there that are not exposed to the anthelmintics. And you can start small and increase that number that you leave untreated as and when you get that confidence that you're not going to lose production, you're not going to have a health and welfare issue. Sorry
to interrupt. And there's a lot of farmers. There's a lot of farmers out there getting excited about this, and really want to try it, but they're also asking a lot of questions. Do you think the answers are there yet? I mean, I know you sort of said, it's about what setting your targets where you want them, or I suppose maybe if you're doing regular weighing, you know what your growth rate is, and then anything that's sort of outside that parameter. But I mean, can you use TST without the happy factor, which is the algorithm and that drives some of these apps and schemes?
Absolutely, Kevin. I think it's benchmarking what you expect on your farm. Are you as Leslie said, are you expecting 100 because you've got really rubbish grass, 200, 300? What is that expectation? And as you said, you're treating what's in front of you. So if you think, actually, I would be expecting all of my animals to be putting on 250 grams a day, and some of those are not. When you draw out those animals, you can go, okay, that's fine. I've identified those that have done that. But also, there's always those ones that lag behind, and you go, well, actually, they're the ones that I need to be thinking about. So it's really, you don't need to have big convoluted systems. It's really, it can be done cheap and cheerful. I mean, obviously, if you've got electronic crush, electronic EID, these things are much easier, and if automatic drafting systems. But if you haven't, it doesn't mean you can't do it. As long as you are looking at what's going on in your animals and you're happy with some and not happy with others, then use that as the decision to do it.
If you're just sticking a slaughter tag in there, you may as well stick it in earlier, and as you're weighing them, you're getting those growth rates up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have had those conversations about EID and the elephant in the room. They most definitely have a lot more capacity than some people use them for. And I think, if you're going to put them in, make them pay for themselves. It's good. You can get ones, you can get those the actual readers, or you can use the electronic drafting system depending on what your budget is. But absolutely, there's lots of systems there where you can go from the cheaper end to all singing, all dancing. But absolutely. I'm a great believer in the use of EID as a tool for helping make decisions, making decisions on whether or not you've treated them more regularly, and for other things. Have you had fly strike foot problems? Then there's a lot of capability, not just worms, but other things too. And actually, that's what that last part of that slide is talking about. Are the technologies there that we can use from it. And again, we're looking to see if there's tech there that we can use to help identify those animals that might benefit from being treated.
If
So,
it's not, sorry to interrupt there, Kevin, if it's not too late, the poll is available now if you still would find it interesting to see people's views.
We'll do it at the end of Dave's thing, I think, so that we don't sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's actually me, Kevin. I think in answer to
you just touched on the diarrhea index there. I mean, that's another tricky one, especially, I mean, for things like ewes. Do worms cause any diarrhea in ewes, or?
They tend to cause less. They cause less of an issue. It doesn't mean they don't, Kevin. So it is much more a one. And I've put it in there because people have used it. I'm not totally convinced it's necessarily the way forward, because not all worms cause scour. So yeah, I put it in there because it has been used. I think egg counts, body condition, and weight gain, those things are things that everyone is happy with. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a place. And people, and again, it's that whole thing of making decisions where you might use the ideas. Well, are there lots of animals, are there animals within your group who you have to dag regularly, that you have to treat for fly strike because, they're just always dirty, and then do you want to make the decision to get rid of them?
It might be a genetic thing rather than
yeah, absolutely.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because a lot of scouring is nutritional scouring. You get a year like this and you swap pastures, you put them onto something a bit stronger and they start scouring. It's as you say, Dave, it's a bit tricky, that one, isn't it?
It is. As I say, I put it there because people have looked at it and used it. I'm not necessarily a great believer in that, but I do believe it has a place of you identifying it, once you've got past the sort of nutritional scary aspect of it.
Okay,
and,
Katie,
that's me.
Great, thank you, Dave. Okay, Katie, if you wanted to
Quickly do the poll. Okay.
just out of interest, are you monitoring and using diagnostic tools? Yes, I've been using them for years. Yes, I've just started. No, thinking about it. I used to, but no, not anymore. Says I can't vote here.
No, we're not allowed either. Not so.
What do we do now?
I think that might be everyone has taken part that wanted to. So yeah, looks as though probably the answer you'd be looking for is that most people have been using them for years.
On the screen. Good.
Okay, if I end the poll, then you can see the results.
That's probably
Oh yeah.
Good. Well worth a dabble if
Okay.
you are thinking about it. That's all I'd say. Great. Thank you, Dave. And it seems rather strange talking about liver fluke this time of year, but we've had an interesting winter, and we won't be far away from the next winter, and I don't know what's about, but I'm sure Philip will fill us in.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Good evening, everybody. I'm hoping I didn't put any animations in my slides, so it doesn't give Katie too many more nightmares swapping them over. Slides a little bit wordy, but just to make the point, I guess, that I'll probably be reiterating what others have said early on, but hopefully that reinforces some of the messages. And as you know, I'm fascinated about fluke and need to get out more, but it is a challenge, and it's becoming an all year challenge as well. It used to be quite seasonal, and you could do certain things at certain times of the year, and that would be pretty well get you through the year. But it's a moving target nowadays, as Kevin's alluded to, and we have had a funny old year with a mild winter and a cool spring, and it's been extremely wet in some places. We just need to think about the implications of that for the liver fluke life cycle, especially the stages that are out there on pasture. I'm always teasing Dave that fluke are more complicated than his roundworms, but they're long lived in the environment, and the environment and the weather has quite an impact on risk. But even after X number of years working on fluke, I would be the first to say it's very hard to predict. I mean, there was a fluke forecasting model which looks at temperature and rainfall and evapotranspiration, and that will give an indication of risk across the country, and that will be appearing later in the year. But speaking to the people who put the forecast together, fluke is starting to fall slightly outside of the envelope that used to dictate that forecast, and we just need to be really mindful. And it just reinforces to me the need to do diagnostic testing and routine monitoring, as Kevin and Dave and Leslie both have all said, because your animals, what they're encountering, where they're grazing, that's the best indication. We can forecast, and that helps make decisions, but diagnostic treatment or diagnostic testing and routine monitoring are key, so we're making informed decisions. Unlike worms, we have a few more options for fluke. Each have the pros and cons, and they're nicely tabulated. We went to great lengths to produce this sort of poster, and it's on the SCOPS website, and I hope you've already seen it, but it's worth a proper look. It looks at the different risk periods and what tests might be useful around those times. It also gives you a kind of timeline of when different tests are the best to use. And the current best option as we speak now would be blood testing, especially sentinel lambs, ideally born this year, first season grazers. Same applies to calves, because that's the earliest indication of a fluke infection. The test becomes positive within 2 weeks. And a bit of encouraging new development, and a shameless plug for some really interesting research done at the University of Liverpool that has brought a lateral flow test that's hopefully coming to market later this year. So that's turning the blood test into the lateral flow devices that we all became too familiar with during COVID. So that potentially allows operators to make a decision around treatments almost pen side, because previously the vet would have had to come out, take bloods, send them away to the lab, and wait possibly weeks for results coming back. So this really could be a game changer. So watch this space.
What sort of quantity of, sorry, interrupting, what sort of quantity of sheep would you have to do?
I think they're still working through the actual nuts and bolts of the numbers, but it's in the ballpark of 10 to 12, and it would be individual animals. It's not, I mean, it's like a typical blood test, not pooled. So I think they're working through price points and they're bringing it all to market. So that will come, and the clever guys at Liverpool will be doing the number crunching around the sensitivity and the specificity of that test. But the prototype looks really promising. So watch this space. And then later, as the year goes on, we can start to look to the fecal tests that we're maybe more familiar with. So that's egg counts. So the fluke egg count is a useful test as well, although it only tells you you've got adults there, because fluke need to be 10 weeks or 12 weeks of age before they lay eggs. And then there's a copper antigen that comes in. That's that secretion in the feces that comes in a bit earlier. So you could be looking at, I mean, it's hard to put a calendar month on it, but you could be looking sort of late summer onwards to perform those tests and do that as routine sampling. And a bit like Dave said, the DEFRA pathway and the preparing for sustainable farming initiatives allow vets and farmers to fund those sorts of treatments. And the fluke ones are open to all of the different fluke tests that are available. Initially, it was just an egg count. And just to make the point that the fecal tests are really quite useful for efficacy testing on the day of treatment, and again 21 days later to see what's happened. That signal, that's really important. It comes back to what Dave said, make sure your treatment's effective. So could we just move on to the next slide, please? I hope it doesn't crash your computer. Yeah, it's just something we're often asked about, is rumen fluke. And there's no doubt, it has changed a bit. It's becoming quite common now, but I don't think the message has changed all that much. Rumen fluke is really common in Ireland, so we maybe need to look to the west to see what might be coming our way. The parasite has a similar life cycle to liver fluke. It uses the same little mud snail intermediate host, and it's often found as co-infections in the same animals. It's no great surprise. And it can cause clinical signs and clinical disease. There are reports in the veterinary literature for that, but thankfully, clinical disease caused by rumen fluke is extremely rare. Testing labs do routinely see rumen fluke eggs now, and you can see a nice image at the bottom there. So those little eggs, the clear ones are actually rumen fluke eggs, and the gold one there you can see is a liver fluke egg. They come out in the same sedimentation. So it's no great surprise to see that sort of number of eggs in a fecal sample, but that's still not a reason to reach for the drench gun. And I think that message is still holding. I mean, Scops and others put a letter into the vet record to try and explain our thinking behind that. And it's because there's very little or no evidence of clinical or production impacts in the literature, in studies, field studies, and experimental challenge studies. I know farmers maybe see it differently and are convinced that animals recover and improve dramatically after successful treatment. So we need to take that seriously and just keep an eye on it. It's one to watch, but liver fluke is still the acknowledged pathogen, and we need to get on top of that. And one other thing to mention at this point is we only have one fluticide amongst the few that we have that has activity against rumen fluke. The active ingredient is oxyclosanide, but that's a liver fluke drug in its own right. We need to be careful with how we use that. And we know to our cost that relying on one active is not a sustainable way to control fluke or anything else. Just one more slide, Katie. I just threw some slides together just to sort of give me some structure. And we're often asked about any sort of alternative control methods. And I mean, this is potentially the most sustainable control method we could have as anti-parasite vaccines. And coming from a research institute, we're lucky to be able to have our finger on the pulse here. It's a true green solution in the face of a changing sort of parasite populations, increasing resistance, but also concerns, as Leslie alluded to at the outset, about potential environmental impacts of our veterinary medicines. Vaccines would be a real game changer. But that's technically challenging. Vaccines for these parasites, they're very complicated organisms. We have a commercial vaccine against the Barber's pole worm, Haemonchus, that we would have heard about in discussions earlier. But that's only available in the UK through a special import certificate. So you need to have a conversation with your vet about that scenario. But we're also working on vaccines against the species that are really common in the UK, and that would be Telodorsagia, the dominant roundworm in the UK and the most resistant worm that we have, and also Trichostrongylus. So preliminary vaccine trial results look really promising. We can see significant reductions in egg counts and worm burdens. And there's just a little snapshot there of a series of vaccine trials. And the red line is the egg count from control animals, and the blue line is the vaccinated animals. And you can see we're trying our best to keep that blue line flatlining along the bottom. Typical vaccine work, it's challenging and it's variable, and we need to iron out that variability. And there are ways of doing that, swapping antigens in and out, and different ways of administering vaccines. But that work is looking promising, and we just have to hope that we can bring this through to commercialization. And I know Kevin said at the outset that we're going to stick with internal parasites, but just to say about sheep scab that we're all concerned about too. We have a prototype vaccine for that. Stu Burgess and his team have a vaccine that gives, in good trials, a 68% reduction in the lesion size and a significant reduction in transmission. So I just need to make a shout out to colleagues Al Nisbet and Dan Price and Stu for their vaccine work that's working away in the background as we're doing our best to try and sustainably control parasites with chemicals and grazing management and targeted treatments and various other approaches. So that's all the slides that I had. So I don't know if that brings us back to a more open conversation, but hopefully there'll be some recurring themes there.
What you touched on there, Philip, about your vaccine for the stomach worms. Will that enhance or conflict with breeding for resistance and resilience? Or?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I mean it is something we'll need to bear in mind. It depends what's the metric or the mechanism whereby an animal becomes resistant or resilient, whether that's an immunological or whether it's something in their grazing behavior or some other mechanism. So I mean, it depends. I mean, Haemonchus was an unusual vaccine in the sense that it was raising an antibody to an antigen in the parasite's gut, and it took advantage of the fact it was a blood feeder. So it sort of almost circumvents the immune system completely. It's not a natural sort of immune response, whereas the other two are trying to build on a natural immune response. So if that's part of your resistance and resilience and the breeding, then it should, I mean, it should enhance. It shouldn't conflict. You know, that the idea would be a win-win in that scenario, that you're giving animals a help, and you're boosting their immune system by picking the right antigens that have the protective capacity behind it.
And you've touched on that word that everyone fears sometimes, homunculus. Leslie, Dave, do you want to say a little bit about? You could do a whole webinar on homunculus, but
We
do you
have
want to
done.
say a little bit about that?
I think we need to be careful, because we do need to go on. We would go on for days, but obviously homunculus as a worm is different to the others. It has different characteristics, and it shows differently, doesn't it, Dave? The symptoms are different. We don't tend to get scouring. We get anemia, and it tends to hit us out of the blue a little bit. So homunculus is a bit of a different beast. I think for tonight's purposes is, if you haven't got homunculus on your farm, you don't want it. So do everything you can in terms of quarantine to not on treatments, not to bring it in. And, you know, if you are starting to see funny things like sheep losing condition, massive worm counts, one of the first sniffs you get that you might have a problem is you suddenly get a worm count that's into the thousands, don't you, Dave? You know, I mean, you chip in, but you know, that's the first sniff. And if you do that, then please get some advice. Don't try and second guess it yourself if you're not used to it, because it is a different parasite. And so I think that from my point of view at this stage tonight, maybe that's the thing, you know, if you suspect something, go and have a word with your vet, your advisor, and get some help to investigate it.
It's quite an interesting one, because it has a little bit of a parallel overlap with fluke, because the clinical signs are similar, because it's a blood-feeding parasite, with some of the treatments are similar.
We do quite often get people who assume they've got fluke, and actually it isn't, or vice versa. So absolutely right. Yeah, Philip, it's
all the more reason to test.
There's tools out there to help.
Yeah, but I was going to say, but it is a different beastie. But actually, the tool, as you say, Kevin, you know, the tools that we would use to look for all the other worms are readily available for that too, you know, and the treatments, if they're working, work against that parasite too. So again, it's just understanding what's happening. I think is the important bit.
Yeah.
We'll change tack slightly, because Penny's put a question in there. Is it a good idea to blanket treat all lambs with Zolvix once a year in a flock with no known resistancy? So I think basically she's saying, if you don't actually know you've got.
Okay, so the question, I think, to start with is, are you saying, Penny, that you haven't got any resistance, that all the other groups are still working for you, or do you know that you have got it, or you've not looked for it, so you don't know? I mean, I would say, Dave, that you, in either of those cases, you still as well to do that, because even if you haven't got it at the moment, every time you use something else, you're doing some selection.
Timing is critical, though, isn't it, as well?
The timing's critical, and I think, you know, the devil's in the detail a little bit. So either Zolvix or Startect. I mean, obviously we've got both of them available this year, so which is great, because that helps. One helps the other, and it stops us having to rely too much on one. But the timing's important. So this year, I've got some people who we really have very low burdens all the way through. We haven't drenched anything yet, apart from Nematodirus earlier in the year, and we may not drench anything again for some time. I don't know yet. In that case, if I've not used much of the other wormers, I may not. But in most circumstances, if you've wormed your lamb several times, then you want to wait until as late in the season as you can, and then use a treatment with either a group 4 or a group 5 to get the real benefits from them.
There's a couple of words that stand out there, though. That's blanket treat, Dave. I mean, what about refugia and the leaving the 10% when it comes to a clear out dose?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're going to go for the clear out dose, I think actually treating everything is the right way forward, because in essence, what you're trying to do is just to clear those whatever resistant parasites might be there out of those systems. So I think, yeah, it's probably the one time where we all would advocate, yeah, actually nematovirus would be the other point where you would do it, but where you go, actually blanket treat them, use it, clear it all out. As Leslie says, timing is important. And that refugia, I kind of alluded to it. Basically, the point behind it is you want to leave, at that point, the refugia is on the grass. And basically, there should be enough worms on your grass so that if anything happens to survive, it has very little time to have a competitive advantage over the rest of it. So basically what it is as soon as because it has no persistency, as soon as it's out of the system, all of those hopefully susceptible worms come back, and that's the thing. So that stops the resistance development, and that's what it's really there for, is to break resistance development on your farm.
But I mean, if you were, for some people may time that, so they might be moving on to some cleaner grade, not clean, but lower challenge pasture or so on. So if you're concerned about that, then 4 or 5 days after treatment on the original dirty pasture before moving, Dave, and then you just sort of hedge your bets a bit. But it is important to do all the lambs.
And do it when it needs doing, not it's September, the Zolvic's out.
When it needs doing, and on the basis of a fecal egg count as well, of course, because there's no point in doing it if there's no fecal egg count. But there has been a bit of chatter about saying, oh, well, it's a drench that we do at weaning. No, it isn't. It might be right at weaning for the odd flock, but for most flocks, it's going to be somewhere downstream of weaning, really, that you're going to get the best bang for your buck, so to speak, in terms of using one of those.
What about weaning as a whole, not just with Zolvix? It's very easy for farmers to think, oh, I'm weaning them or shearing. I'm just going to get the drench gun out and do them. Is there a worm challenge at weaning, Dave?
Yeah, it very much depends on the year, Kevin, and farm to farm, field to field. This is always the issue with these things. It's never, I think, hopefully folk have gotten from it, this is where egg counts are really, really useful, is because actually you go, okay, have they got a challenge? The thing, there are times where you may not want to, and nematovirus is one of those times where we often just say, if you think you have that problem or you have that concern, treat it. Yeah, and the other time is that sort of post, not that we've had any really dry spells, but it's that other one is when we have lots of, everything dries out. Fingers crossed, we get a bit of dryness and things have the opportunity to dry out. Certainly up here, we're living in a swamp. But it's if things do dry out and there's a sudden downpour of rain, often 10 days later, your animals will get loads and loads of larvae because it's basically released everything from that dry feces. So again, it's another point where you think actually you don't necessarily want to wait for egg counts, so there are points where you wouldn't necessarily want to use egg counts, and that might be a couple of those points where it is. But other than that, monitor.
It's like electricity, isn't it? We can't see it. We know it's there and it's moving about, and unless we've actually got a tester, we don't know. And if we don't test, we might get a shock.
Weaning tends to be a time, isn't it, when people want to worm. But actually, I've been out on farm this morning and we've been talking about weaning lambs next week. And from a management point of view, I always like the ewes to be moved away and leave the lambs where they are for at least for a few days, just to reduce the stress. That gives you a beautiful opportunity to do what Dave says and do a fecal egg count while those lambs are just settling out, and you're just letting them get over the stress just to see whether or not they do actually need a drench at that stage. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, really.
It's easier to find the poo too, isn't it?
It is much easier to find the poo, absolutely.
Yeah. And what effect does the ewe have on the lamb? So if you take, sort of weaning 12 weeks or 14 weeks, or some do earlier, taking it away, the ewe away, reduces the risk of contamination to the lambs, or are they hoovering up the worms?
Yeah, hopefully by the time you get to that sort of weaning time, the ewes should be a nice immune body that is just basically hoovering stuff up. Yeah, you may get a few of those that don't mount very strong immune responses, but on the whole, 80% of those animals will be hoovering away quite the thing So yeah, they're good. And you know, using ewes to clean up pastures, you know, when we were talking about where we know there are risk fields, using ewes post weaning and using cattle are really good for cleaning up pastures. You know.
And paddock grazing, there's another risk there, and there as they keep coming round, it'll build up.
Yeah, maybe Leslie has more to put into this, but I don't know. We know enough that that paddock, the sort of cellular rotational grazing works really well because it's all based on nutrition. And I know, Leslie, that's a perfect thing. But what we don't know is often you come back 24 to 28 days in that cycle, and that's just perfect for larvae for eggs that have been passed out to have hatched and go to grow on to become larvae. What we never quite know is the improved nutrition enough to combat the potential risk that larvae have by having more of them on that paddock. Yeah,
I think that's where your monitoring comes in as well, doesn't it, Dave? In the sense, if you're doing your fecal egg counts, then you're getting an idea of how much contamination is going down. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can have a perfect storm in a rotational grazing system, and other times it can work really, really well because of the nutritional levels and everything. You know, you're avoiding that. But one of the things I was going to just say, Dave, this year, and one of the things that we're all facing, I think, Kevin, this grazing's getting away from us a bit now. So actually, these sheep are on quite long grass at the moment, so they're not being forced down into where the larvae are. So how much of a difference is that making for us, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where they eat, doesn't it? I know a lot of animals don't like it when that grass gets away, but of course they've got to eat. The larvae tend to be within that bottom 10 centimeters. They can't climb indefinitely, so they tend to be quite low down to the grass. And yeah, if they're chomping away up above that, then yeah, their challenge is going to be less than it is if they are getting down there. For certain.
Well, we've come to the end of our hour, really, and I know we could talk forever about parasites, but I think we need to sort of bring it to a close there. I'm sure if anyone's got any further questions, then feel free to contact. I'm sure you guys are always happy to answer questions, and you'll all be at the sheep event, the NSA sheep event on 3rd of July, so that'll be quite good to catch up all face to face, and I'm sure you'll be there. I know, Leslie, you'll have a Scops stand, and Moredun's got there. You're bringing the bus down.
Yep, we're bringing our.
Yep.
So yeah,
we'll be next to each other, and also on the Scops stand, we are going to be featuring it, hopefully with the help of Moredun as well. We're going to do a big thing about fecal egg counting and so on. So, if you've not done it yet, or you're not getting on with it too well, or whatever, come and give us a shout. Come and talk to us.
Absolutely.
I didn't make the cut this year, so I'll have to leave it to Dave to do fluke and worm together. He knows what he's doing.
Maybe after tonight's performance, I'll ask you to come. That's great. Just a couple of reminders as well. Scops podcast, really great. There's some new ones coming out. It's through this year, and if you haven't heard the ones from last year, they're still topical. Go and check them out. I don't know if Katie's got a link there, but you can find them on Spotify, all sorts of places. Actually, on the Scops website as well. Technical manual for those who SQPs or advisors who want to look. Go into that technical manual on the Scops website. There's some great stuff on the Moredun website. So thank you all for joining us again, and see you at the next one or at the event. Come and say hi.
Thanks, Sam.
Good night.